What's up, guys? Today we're going to take a look at taking the calendar we just made and make a month calendar out of it. The audio is being a little weird today, so apologize for that. We were having trouble with it the other day. Still sorting some things out in our studio. So let's just dive into where we were at yesterday, our last vlog. So the last thing that we actually did was we went into the meetings index HTML ERB here, and we used Simple Calendar to render a new 2-week long calendar. And it produced something like this. It's pretty cool. Just produces 2 weeks, 7 days apiece. Voila, you have a calendar. And this is great, but we actually want to produce a month calendar now. So we have our regular generic calendar, and it'd be really killer to have a month-long calendar that we could just simply swap out by saying Simple Calendar month calendar. We can remove this number of days option because we don't need that, and get rid of these notifications up here. And in theory, we should be able to just refresh this page and have a month calendar from our gem. But of course, we haven't defined that, so let's go do that and take our code from before, abstract it a little bit, make a month calendar out of it. So we'll do a little refactoring here to pull this off. So I'm going to open up the Simple Calendar gem. We're going to take a look at the lib directory. And our calendar file here is the one we really want. And we're going to go into the month calendar, which is empty right now. I deleted all the code out of there before. And we're going to start to make our changes to the Simple Calendar calendar to handle the month one. So really, we just need this month calendar here, and it should inherit from the Simple Calendar, and that would allow us to skip a lot of these things. So we don't need this initializer because we can use the Simple Calendar one. Our start date would still be date.today, unless you passed in the param, so that's good. Now the date range is going to be a little bit different, and we don't need the additional days anymore because the date range is calculated based upon the month that we're at. So if we jump back to our code from before, we can grab the date range from our original example and paste that in here as a replacement, and voila. Now we get the start date, we go to the beginning of the month, beginning of the week, and we go to the end of the month and the end of the week, and we're done. Now, we have a render block here, and we need to render a partial, but it's one of those things where we should talk about this. Basically, this would be amazing if we could just simply take the class name, like month calendar, and render out a partial with that name, rather than having to use the calendar partial every time. So if you look at this, we have this calendar partial, which just opened up here at the bottom. It has a link to the previous view, the next view, and the title is custom, and you're probably going to want to edit this in your application to make sure that like all these tables and classes can be adjusted appropriately. So this is one of those things where I would ideally like you to just be able to edit this view like you would with devise views. So if you've ever installed the devise views and customized the sign-in page, I want it to work very similar to that. I didn't really plan on that, but I knew that I really liked the way devise did it, and we ended up in the same approach, which I think is cool. So the thing we've got here is we have this calendar one, and we could just render this calendar partial, but I think it would be awesome if we took this and we made a custom one for the month calendar so that it's independently customizable from the default calendar. So what we really need to do is copy this, and we need to edit app views simple calendar month calendar.html.erb and paste in this code so that we have a copy of that we can edit. And this will allow us to say, all right, now that we have the month calendar partial, which should show up here, if that ever updates, it should show up right there, and we would actually want to render month calendar, and that's it. But Rails has this really useful helper that we would be allowed to use here because we're importing Rails into our gem, so the gem always will require Rails to exist. And there's something really cool about this. So let's go into our calendar application, open the console. Let's take a look at this. So the idea that you can take the class name of the calendar and then you could convert that to a partial file name is really nifty. So if we had the calendar class, we could ask it for its name, which would return the string version of that. And then we can do this thing called underscore, which basically allows you to convert camel case to an underscored thing. So if you had like simple calendar here, this is how Rails does a lot of the conversions from file names to class names. So it takes the capital letters, it makes them lowercase, and then inserts an underscore in between them. And that's really how that works, which is pretty cool. So we can do that in order to take the month calendar. So we'd have this month calendar string, and we'd be able to underscore it. And that would produce the month calendar string that would make this dynamic, and then we would never have to override this render block, and we could just simply update the date range inside month calendar, which would be ideal. So this is really neat, and another thing that's cool is that if you do simple calendar : month calendar, it's smart enough to know to separate the : section with a slash in the underscored version. Now this is actually how simple calendar or Rails actually is able to convert your class names and modules into file and folder structures. So that's really cool, and this allows us to say the class name of the month calendar can get converted to the directory inside app views and month calendar as well. So we can tackle that all at one time. So here we could just delete all of this out of the month calendar. And then if we go into our calendar.rb, we could replace this hard-coded string with self.class.name.underscore. And because we're in an instance, we have to say self.class to access basically the simple calendar. And then that name will get converted to an underscore. So self.class here will return simple calendar : calendar because we're inside a module. And this will allow us to dynamically render partials based upon the class name. So if you generate a new type of calendar, we'll just have a new type of partial. And if you wanted to, you could create an empty calendar or an empty file like this, and you could just have it render the partial for like calendar. And you could just delegate it away to the other one if you wanted to. But most of the time you're going to want to customize it, so we're going to leave this as it is. But that's a really cool way for us to simplify even further, overriding and making your own other types of calendars based upon this generic calendar. So that's really neat and an awesome feature of just Ruby and Rails, like the underscore method. It's awesome. So now that we have that, if we restart our Rails app and hop back into our view, if we refresh the page, we now have a functional month calendar, and if you've noticed here, it's already working with our meetings that we had from before, which is really cool. So within like just a couple minutes, we're able to build a new calendar, override one single line of code, and then make a new partial, and voila, you have a new calendar. And the beauty of all of this is that we can build new calendars easily, we can override their views super easily, because we can just override them in our Rails app, and they'll all be namespaced in the simple calendar folder. We have such a good sort of thing going on here that we can build the week calendar in like 2 seconds. So let's do that. Let's grab this, go into the week calendar, rename from month to week calendar, we're going to get rid of beginning of month on both of these and end of month on those. So we'll just jump to the beginning and the ending of the week. And then we'll grab the month calendar partial. We'll do edit app views, simple calendar, week calendar, HTML, ARB, paste this in. And rather than doing like the month title, we could leave that if we wanted, or we could display, because it's a week, we can say like, this is week 32 of the year. We could totally do that too. Week of the year, Rails is probably what we're gonna look for. We need to find that week number. There's gotta be a way to find that. But I can't quite remember. I believe %U is the week of the year. So interestingly, %U and %W do two different things. One is if the week starts on Sunday, one starts on Monday, which is kind of annoying. So maybe there's a better way to do it. But regardless, we can just take this and we can say, let's grab this. Let's replace this code here with start date dot strf time %U to I, and we could say this is week whatever. We can hop back to our calendar, do a week calendar, and then I believe we're gonna have to restart a Rails server. And once this is back up and loaded, we now have a week calendar. We have week 26. And yeah, you can see these weeks are counting up and counting down and everything. Voila, we're done. We have a week calendar. And we've customized the default title for it, which is super cool as well. That's really it. We've magically built this week calendar, and that's all we had to do. We didn't have to do anything crazy. It took us 2 seconds to do that, if I wasn't talking all about how it worked. So that's cool. We've made some serious progress. We can make new calendars. We can override these easily. We can make any changes to these we want. If you don't want abbreviated day names, you can just delete that part, whatever. I think the next piece that we need to do is get rid of these @ meetings, because that's hard-coded in, and we need to dynamically pass that in through the calendar at the very beginning when you instantiate it. So that'll be tomorrow's episode. We just did some cool refactorings and just kind of showcased how wonderfully flexible this result has been. And now we're off to the races. So you'll see you next episode. Peace.